There is one thing a narcissist will never admit to you. One thing they will spend their whole life hiding behind charm, behind explosive anger, behind total silence, and behind tears that only appear when it suits them. Here is the truth. The narcissist is not scared of your anger. They are not scared of your tears. They are not scared of your threats to leave. They have already lived through all of that 100 times before. So what actually terrifies them, what truly shakes the dark foundation inside their mind, is the exact moment you stop reacting. The moment you finally see them clearly. The moment your eyes stop pleading for answers and start simply observing them. Because in that instant, something they have relied on for years completely falls apart. The illusion cracks, and whatever pattern of manipulation, control, and quiet domination has been feeding off you suddenly realizes it is facing someone it can no longer feed on. That is the moment the narcissist begins acting in strange and very specific ways. And once you learn to notice those ways, you will understand something most people never figure out in their whole lives. The narcissist was never the powerful one. You were. They just made sure you never discovered that. Before we go any further, do something for yourself. If you have ever been manipulated, gaslit, or emotionally drained by someone who claimed they loved you, follow this channel right now. Not for me, but for you. Because what comes next may change the way you look at every narcissist you have ever known. Most people never realize that narcissists do not run on love or logic or even hatred. They run on control. Control is their oxygen. Control is the only thing that quiets the deep emptiness living inside them. And the way they gain that control is by studying you closely. They study your fears, your hopes, your old wounds, your loneliness, and your deep need to be understood. Then they position themselves as the perfect answer to everything you have ever felt was missing. That is why the relationship felt so magical in the beginning. It was not love, it was reconnaissance. They were mapping out your soul so they could later use it against you. And the moment you start healing, the moment you start knowing yourself again, that map becomes completely useless and their power starts to die. That is when their behavior begins to shift in ways that can feel almost strange to watch. Pay attention here, because this part changes everything. When a narcissist senses their grip on you is slipping, they do not respond with self-reflection. They respond with panic dressed up as dominance. They suddenly turn cold or suddenly turn overly sweet. They pull away with no explanation, or they flood you with attention you never asked for. They start fights over nothing. They dig up old wounds. They accuse you of things you never did. They rewrite history right in front of you, expecting you to flinch, to doubt yourself, and to fold back into the small shape they once carved out for you. And when you do not fold, when you stay completely still, when your eyes stay calm, something inside them starts to unravel because their entire identity depends completely on your reaction. Without your reaction, in a way, they stop existing. Here is the part nobody talks about. The narcissist is not a strong person pretending to be weak. The narcissist is a deeply frightened person pretending to be a god. Underneath the arrogance, the cruelty, and the cold distance, there is a child who never learned how to feel safe inside their own skin. That is why they need to dominate. That is why they need to humiliate. That is why they need to be admired, feared, obeyed, and never questioned. And when someone like you, someone who has done the deep inner work, someone who has started to truly value themselves, walks into their life and refuses to bow down, the narcissist feels something close to pure existential horror. Because for the very first time, they are forced to feel the exact thing they have spent their whole life running from, which is their own emptiness, their own smallness, and their own deep shame. And what happens next tells you everything you need to know. The first sign that a narcissist is losing their grip on you is sudden, irrational rage. Not anger that makes sense. Rage that erupts out of nowhere, wildly out of proportion, and often aimed at something small. A simple tone of voice, a slightly delayed reply, a boundary you set gently, or a moment you did not laugh at their joke. That rage was never really about what you did. It was about what you did not give them. You did not give them fear. You did not give them submission. You did not give them the emotional supply they were used to pulling from you. So they escalate. Because in their distorted mind, if charm no longer works, then intimidation must. And if intimidation does not work either, then destruction will. The second sign is sudden withdrawal. The silent treatment, the cold shoulder, the disappearing act, or the blank stare across the room. To someone untrained in this, it looks like indifference. But what is actually happening inside them is the complete opposite of calm. They are punishing you. They are trying to make you feel invisible, abandoned, and desperate. They are testing whether that old wound inside you, the wound of not feeling loved, not feeling chosen, and not feeling like enough, is still strong enough to drag you back to them on your knees. And if you stay grounded, if you do not chase them, if you do not break the silence first, you have just done something a narcissist cannot tolerate. You have shown them that their absence does not destroy you, and that is a wound to their ego that they will carry for a very long time. But here is where it gets even darker. The third sign is blame shifting that turns almost theatrical. Suddenly, every single problem in the relationship is your fault. Every cruel word that came out of their mouth happened because you provoked it. Every lie they told was your fault because you did not trust them enough. Every act of betrayal happened because you did not love them the right way. This is not really an argument. This is a psychological operation. The narcissist is trying to reinstall the old software of guilt, shame, and self-doubt back into your mind. Because without that software running quietly in the background, you become completely unreachable. You become unbreakable. You become free. And freedom in someone they used to control is the one thing they cannot allow to exist in peace. The fourth sign is the smear campaign. When every attempt at internal manipulation fails, the narcissist turns outward. They start talking about you to friends, to family, to coworkers, and sometimes even to your own children. They paint you as crazy, unstable, cold, selfish, and ungrateful. They flip the story so cleanly that even people who have known you for years start looking at you with confusion. And here is what most people who go through this never fully understand. The smear campaign is not really an attack on your reputation. It is an attempt to rebuild the cage. Because if they can convince the world that you are the problem, then maybe, just maybe, they can convince you of that too. The smear campaign is really just the desperate roar of a predator who has lost its prey. If any of this is hitting home, if this is reaching something deep inside you, follow this channel right now, because everything you are about to hear is going to help you take back what was taken from you. Drop one word in the comments below, just one word, awake, so I know you are still with me, because this next part is where the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Most people never realize that emotional independence is the single most threatening force in a narcissist's life. Not money, not status, not even the threat of you leaving. It is emotional independence. The moment you stop needing their approval, their validation, their attention, or their permission to feel okay about yourself, you have effectively cut the cord they were feeding through. And a narcissist without a feeding source becomes a deeply unstable creature. That is why they get more aggressive, not less, when you start to heal. Because in their mind, your healing is their starvation. Your peace is their famine. Your self-respect is their exile. They do not want you well. They want you dependent. They want you reactive. The healthier you become, the more dangerous you become to the version of you they built inside their own head. Pay attention here, because this part changes everything too. Boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are mirrors, and a narcissist cannot stand mirrors. Every time you set a boundary, no matter how gently you say it, you force them to see themselves clearly. You force them to face the fact that you have a self, a soul, a center that exists outside of them and was never theirs to command. That is unbearable for them because in their inner world, you were never really a separate person. You existed as a function of supply, of admiration, and of emotional regulation for them. And when that function suddenly says no, when that function starts having a life of its own, the narcissist feels something close to a betrayal of massive proportions. That is why they react to boundaries the exact same way most people react to actual physical violence, because to them, setting a boundary feels exactly like violence. Your refusal to comply is the complete destruction of their entire universe. Here is the part nobody ever talks about. Underneath every single narcissistic behavior, underneath every insult, every silent treatment, every guilt trip, every lie, every smear campaign, and every sudden burst of rage, there is one single emotion sitting at the very root of it all: fear. The narcissist is afraid constantly and always. Underneath the confident mask they show the world, they live in a state of ongoing psychological dread. They dread being exposed. They dread being truly seen for who they are. They dread being ordinary. They dread being abandoned. They dread realizing that the self they built is actually completely hollow inside. And the only way they know how to manage that deep dread is to push it outward, to force someone else to carry that burden for them. That someone, for years, was you. And the reason your healing terrifies them so much is because the moment you put down the fear they handed you, they have no choice left but to feel it themselves, and they would rather destroy you completely than feel it. What happens next reveals the ultimate truth. Once you truly understand this, you start to see every single behavior of the narcissist in a completely new light. The sudden rage is not strength. It is pure panic. The cold silence is not power. It is a punishment born out of extreme fear. The blame shifting is not confidence. It is a desperate attempt to keep the mask glued tightly to their face. The smear campaign is not real influence over others. It is simply the sound of someone losing their grip on reality completely. Suddenly, the terrifying giant you were once so afraid of starts to look like exactly what they always were: a deeply frightened person screaming from inside an elaborate costume. And once you see that clearly, you cannot unsee it. Once you cannot unsee it, you can no longer be controlled by it. But here is where the reality gets even darker. The narcissist's deepest fear is not actually you walking away. It is you becoming someone they can no longer recognize, because the version of you they pretended to love was the version that desperately needed them. The version that doubted its own intuition. The version that apologized far too quickly. The version that gave too much of itself, forgave too easily, and stayed far too long. When you transform into someone who knows their own true worth, someone who walks calmly through life, speaks clearly, sets firm boundaries without feeling guilt, and actively chooses peace over endless chaos, that new person becomes a complete stranger to them. And total strangers cannot be manipulated with old emotional wounds, because old wounds belong to older versions of you. The new you has completely rewritten the rules of engagement, and the narcissist simply cannot read the new language you are speaking. This is precisely why your healing is the single greatest threat a narcissist will ever face. Not your revenge, not exposing them to the world, not even your physical abandonment. It is your healing, because revenge can be twisted into a dramatic story about your cruelty. Exposure can be reframed to others as your ongoing bitterness. Abandonment can be rewritten in their mind as their own sudden freedom from you. But true healing cannot be touched. Healing cannot be spun into a lie. Healing cannot be argued with. A healed person is like a sealed door. A healed person does not engage, does not chase after them, does not beg for answers, does not constantly explain themselves, and does not perform for anyone. A healed person simply lives their life. And in that quiet daily living, the narcissist sees something they can never have and can never become. Nothing in this world haunts a narcissist more than watching the very person they tried to destroy walk calmly into a life of genuine peace that they themselves are entirely incapable of building. Pay close attention here, because this part changes everything. Self-respect is the most quiet, most devastating weapon you will ever own in your life. Not loud or aggressive self-respect, but quiet, internal, deeply rooted self-respect. The kind of respect that does not need to be announced to the room, the kind that simply will not bend for anyone. When you truly respect yourself, manipulation has no available surface left to grip onto. Guilt trips slide right off your back. Gaslighting fails to enter your mind because you trust your own personal perception far more than their distorted version of reality. Flattery no longer moves you because your sense of self-worth no longer needs to be borrowed from someone else's superficial words. Threats no longer shake your core because you have already lost the fear of losing what was actively hurting you in the first place. Self-respect makes you completely unreachable in all the emotional places the narcissist used to walk freely. And here is what no one ever told you along the way. You were never weak for being manipulated in the first place. You were open. You were trusting. You were being genuinely loving in a world that taught you to expect love in return. The narcissist did not target you because you were broken or flawed. They targeted you because you were luminous, because you possessed something bright that they could never generate on their own: warmth, depth, authentic empathy, real loyalty, and a soul that could actually feel deeply. They came into your life not to give, but to take, because they could never create from within what you already were on your own. And the exact day you truly understand that reality, the day you stop seeing yourself as a victim of their cleverness and start seeing yourself as the ultimate source of the very light they were trying so hard to steal, something inside you shifts permanently.